thank you for packing out the room, everyone.
So sorry it's so crowded.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, you can barely hear myself think.
So we are very lucky to have John Locke with us again today.
I'm honoured to be back. Thank you.
If I may say so, the mastermind behind Afterlife Inc.
Yeah, I'd accept genius or kind of
Genius.
brilliant leader. Yeah.
And 1/4 of Big Punch Studios, if
Yes.
I'm getting my maths right. Yeah, fantastic. Don't know, he's been with us every year, so you may have encountered him before. So John, if you can take us back to the beginning, have you always been passionate about comics?
Yeah, sorry, I should turn around a bit and actually face everyone. Certainly you as well, so very, very rude of me. Yeah, I have, really, and it's kind of bizarre because I couldn't really tell you why. I think many times my parents have asked me, why don't you, like, you know, they're proud, so we're really proud of what you're doing, but why don't you write a book? You know, as if like a book is proper, we can kind of understand that. And I'm not sure I could tell you entirely why it would have to be comics, because I read fantasy and sci-fi growing up. You'd think that would have ingrained on me. But, you know, as a kid I was also reading, obviously, like the Dandy, Beano, the usual kind of stuff you grow up with in the UK. I even like Thomas the Tank Engine comics, which, you know, I loved. And I remember just like kind of like you talk about these life-changing kind of moments, but I remember it was like I was starting like year 4 or 5 in primary school, and I sat down and it was like the first day of school, and you're sitting next to a person you're going to be sitting next to for the next year or 2 years, you know. And he sat next to me, and I can't remember his name, but I remember he had a comic with him, and it was called Sonic the Comic, and it was based on Sonic the Hedgehog. But it was, and I knew Sonic the Hedgehog from, like, you know, the video games and everything, but it was Sonic the Hedgehog, only he was it was like chapter 6 in this epic saga of interdimensional battles and like evil robots that want to take over the world, and they'd gone back in time and tried to like prevent him ever becoming a blue hedgehog, I don't know, like whatever, however that worked. And it was the weird, genuinely the strangest thing my like 7 or 8 year old self had ever seen in my life, because it was clearly a comic, but it wasn't like the Beano, it wasn't like Desperate Dan or like Dennis, and I'm like, what on earth is this? Like, it was insane, and I was immediately hooked. I had no idea what was going on, but I loved it. And I found out in later life this was a UK Sonic the Hedgehog production, and for whatever reason Sega gave them a very long leash to do whatever they wanted, so they were shameless like Marvel fans, and they ended up having like vast interstellar cosmic battles and stuff like that, and I loved it. And I think from that moment on I knew it would have to be comics. Like it just got me about hey guys, come on in.
Sorry, mate.
Yeah, it just got me at that critical age. And then probably like the next most definitive moment in my life was the first time I ever got I ever picked up a Grant Morrison comic. And I remember going into like Otika's or Waterstones, wherever it is now, and they had all these graphic novels wrapped in cling film, so you couldn't peer inside and read them. And I picked up volume 6 of a JLA. I'd never read a Justice League book in my life, and I thought, I'm going to try something different. And once again, I arrived right at the end of a storyline. I had no idea what was going on, but it was the most insane thing I'd ever read in my life. And kind of like discovering Grant Morrison, the writer, was kind of like this click in my head. And I'd always known I wanted to make comics because I made rather poor comics back in primary school. But when I read my first Grant Morrison book, I was like, oh, like, I want to be a writer, and I want to write comics. And that was it from then on.
And did you go straight from there to Afterlife Inc., or was there...
No, there was like my dark teenage years where I tried... Because I mean, I should probably comment on the Sonic thing for a minute, because in primary school, we made a comic. Me and my 2 best mates, Rayman and Titch, made a comic called Big Punch, which was probably the most shameless rip-off of Sonic the Hedgehog you can imagine. Like, I came up with the most original character of them all, called Donic the Porcupine, who was purple, and a completely different character because his spikes went the other way, you see, you know, Sega never came knocking. And my mate Rayman created a character called Styx, and he was outraged a few years ago when Sega announced the latest addition to Sonic's larger family who is a kind of like orange echidna called Styx, and he's absolutely incensed that they stole his idea. But yeah, we actually made some comics in primary school, which made us really cool. Like, everyone knew, who were the big guys around campus. And then I went to secondary school, and my friends very wisely realised that you shouldn't be making comics about porcupines in secondary school. They will eat you alive. I didn't. It took me a little while to kind of cotton on to that. And I kept kind of telling these stories privately. Like I would draw. Like I wanted to be an artist. I would draw these characters, and I very quickly realised I loved kind of world building. And so what started out as these daft, like innocent little kids characters became this big, again, cosmic saga, and there was like fantasy and everything I was reading in sci-fi books got thrown in. And I remember a friend of mine going, "John, like your stories are really good, but like they're all about porcupines. What's up with that?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is a bit of a niche market." And he said, "Tell you what, and this might sound crazy, why don't you write about humans?" I was like, "Good God, that's so crazy, it might actually work." And I was like, "This is it. This is going to be the one." And I started writing my first superhero comic. It was called Dark Force, which is the most 90s thing you will ever read in your life, and they will be returning in some form because I love them. Because there was, it's like you're kind of like 17, acting like a 14-year-old, and you're drawing these characters. And I had a guy called Obsidian, who had like big hats, dressed in black, had the robes, carried a sword. He was, every kind of like, he just looks badass. I love him to this. And his gimmick was he knew exactly when he was going to die, so he couldn't die a moment before. And I loved him. And I had another guy called Force of Nature, who I really want to get back, because I used to draw these all the time, but I couldn't draw faces, and I couldn't draw anyone unless they were in like an utterly rigid kind of stock pose. So that was how I drew a lot of my characters, and it's why a lot of my characters had masks or weird faces where they didn't have any features. And Force of Nature could control all the elements, and his body was quartered. So he was like fire on one side of his face, which wasn't a face, it was just like a kind of disc. Fire on one side, lightning on the other, one leg was rock and one leg was ice. And I love these guys, and I made like the craziest stories you can imagine. And it was this big kind of, like in my head, it was kind of like the next Sandman. It was like this massive epic thing. But people would ask me, "What's it about?" And I couldn't tell you, because it was about everything and nothing at the same time. Like, it was so unfocused. And I remember I carried this throughout uni, and I was kind of writing stuff and contacting a few artists and trying to get this off the ground. And I went to, I moved to Canada after finishing my degree, which was actually in biological sciences. It's not in writing at all. And I went to Canada, and I arrived like, yes, this is it. I'm gonna and like, I'm close to America. That's where the comics come from, and I'm gonna like have all these adventures. And I went to a comic shop and called the Beguiling in Toronto. It was a very kind of classy shop. Like Neil Gaiman would come and do readings there and stuff. And I remember talking to the owner, saying like, "I've got an idea for a comic." And he said, and he gave me the best and harshest advice I've ever had in my life, which was, because I said, "I've got a great idea for a comic." And he said, "I'm going to stop you there. There is nothing more overrated than a good idea." Just then, and it crushed me, and I was like, "Good God, that's horrible! What a mean person! How could you say this to me?" And I thought about it, and I was like, "Yeah, like talk is cheap, and I'm always talking about doing this comic, and it's nothing but an idea, and it will always be pure in my head because it's an idea, but I've never made it real." And it crushed me, but I went back to the drawing board, and I thought, I need to start from scratch. And I had this idea about a murder mystery set in the afterlife. And all I knew was that the main character would be called Jack, and the afterlife would be many levels. And there was this idea that like if someone got killed in one level, they would drop down to the next level. And it was about a guy who was trying to solve his own murder in the afterlife, while someone was tracking him down and killing him on every level. And his soul got weaker and weaker and weaker, and he had to do it before that was over. And then that very quickly suddenly just became, oh, what if it was a business? And then suddenly in like the kind of that latter part of 2007, I came up with these ideas and these characters, and and I thought it needs a name, something like Afterlife Inc. but better. And I just never kind of progressed beyond that point. And I was like, what can I call Jack? Jack Kismet? I was kind of running with that idea, because I bet Jack Fortune is taken. And I don't think it was, and I still don't think it was, because I never got better than that. And I always knew like he'd have a friend who was made out of gold metal for some reason. I don't know why, it was like a dream. And I always knew that there'd be this lady who was like utterly black, like her skin was like the colour of night, and she'd have big Hellboy-like gauntlets. And I was like working in a coffee shop at the time, and they had this little brand of sugar sachets. And on the cover of the sugar sachet was like this guy, like a very stylized drawing of a man strumming a mandolin, and he had a big hat and very long fingers. And I looked at it and I thought, that's my archangel, that's Annabelle. And I took him, and he became this like very regal, godlike being in the afterlife. And everything I kind of picked up in that year in Canada just fed its way into the book. Like one of my colleagues, her dog was called Lux, and I thought that's the most amazing name in the world. I'm going to nick that. But his character, and the name means light in Latin, and I'll have his character, just utter blackness, will be that. And it suddenly all just came together. And I think Nuriel at one point was going to be just a big man on fire, but he suddenly morphed into being a big lion man on fire. When in doubt, add lion. And I'm amazed at how much it kind of just arrived fully formed in a weird way. And that was 2007. And I thought, yes, great, this is me doing, not talking about it. And I didn't make a comic until 2011. It took me that long. Because I was chatting to a Canadian artist. We'd met on MSN Messenger, which if you're younger than, 18 is what your grandparents used to communicate on. And he was Canadian, and we hung out in Canada, and he became part of our friendship group. But bless him, like, he was doing it all for free, and he just couldn't really commit. He wasn't like at a place in his life where he could make this work. And I spent the whole of Canada, this whole year, travelling and writing, and I wrote another series called Biotes, which has never seen the light of day, and I'm thinking of maybe dusting off. It was basically real-world Digimon. It was basically like these eggs rain down all over the planet, and these weird monsters come out, which bond with whoever's nearest to them. And then they just get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was going to go from like that moment to bringing the world to giant monster-fueled meltdown. And and I just didn't carry that on, and I will at one point when I find the time. And then right at the tail end of the year, I went to a Comic Con, Toronto Fan Expo, and I went to a talk by Matt Fraction, and he hadn't quite hit Matt Fraction level superstardom, which he has now. But he was doing this talk about how to write, and he did this amazing talk, and he was really funny and engaging. And then we said, I raised my hand at the end, I said, like, Matt, when you're writing a comic, do you just start at the beginning and keep writing, and then see where it gets you? Because I keep writing, and I get to like page 20, and I've run out of room. And I've not covered half the stuff I want to. And he said, no. He said, I take a lined bit of paper, and I number every line, and it's one line per page, and I write what happens on every page. And everyone in the audience went, oh, and wrote this down. So I've been stealing that from Matt Fraction ever since. I've been telling everyone who's interested in writing comics, that's how you do it. And I got back home, I got a job, I started saving up a bit of money because I wanted to pay an artist, and eventually advertised online, said I want to make an 8-page short comic to pitch Afterlife Inc. around. And advertised online, met a guy called Ash. I had about 300 people say I want to draw your comic, and it wasn't right with all of them, but Ash responded and said, hey, I've done a few concept sketches of your main guy, what do you think? And it was like suddenly there was Jack Fortune on the page. And I was like, this could actually happen. So I made an 8-page comic. And I thought, I'll pitch this to publishers, and then Afterlife Inc. will be made, and then I'll be a millionaire, and it will all be great. But somehow I just never did that pitch. And then I did a second story, and a third, and I published them on my website, and I think like 2 people checked it out every month. And then suddenly after a year, I was like, I have enough material to make a book. Like, this was never my intention. I never wanted to be a self-publisher. But I found a printer. I printed this book, and I went to my first ever show in February 2012. And the first thing that happened was we set up, and the books arrived at the table. I hadn't seen them until that moment, so my heart was racing. And I looked at the first book I'd ever made, and a lady came up to the table and said, "Oh, is this Afterlife Inc?" I said, "Yeah," like a little scared. And she said, "Oh, I read this online, I love it." And she bought a book right there, and that was the first ever sale I made. And she must have been the one person, other than like my mom, who was checking out the website. And and I think that's it, because I think like all I've ever wanted was someone to do it for me, and no one ever did. And I thought I could wait forever, or I could just do it. And 4 books later, here we are, I guess.
So how has it developed? Has it been gone in unexpected directions, or is it pretty close to what you had in mind from the beginning?
Well, it's entirely not what I expected at all, because we've made 3 books so far of Afterlife Inc., and then the hardback collected edition and crossover with 7 string and all the other big punch stuff we do. But those books of Afterlife Inc. I've made were not the books I originally planned. Because when I was in Canada, I wrote the Afterlife Inc. Bible, if you will, like the whole story, the beginning and the end. And originally it was going to be 6 books, which would be the rise and fall of Afterlife Inc. It would end. There was definitely an ending inside. But I knew I wasn't good enough to write those stories. It was so weird. I could see the shape of it, but I knew I wasn't talented enough to do them justice, and I knew if I dove into them now, I'd ruin it. Like, I actually made issue 1 of that original Afterlife Inc. series. Like, I made a 22-page comic called The Death and Continuing Good Providence of Jack Fortune. And it was like, Jack dies. It's about Jack dying and arriving in the afterlife. And it would have started from Jack dying and would have gone from there. And then when I got home and I started making these short stories, I thought, the beginning's boring. Like, I don't want to talk about how he built the company. I want to have the company ready, and I want them all to be having adventures and stuff. So I just did these stories as if it was already made. And afterwards, everyone told me, like, "Oh, I love how you just started the story like in the middle. That's genius." And I was like, "Yeah, I planned it. that was totally the plan." And the irony is that I made 3 books that were never part of my original plan, and there are now characters in the book who were never part of the original plan. And it's so bizarre, because I feel like I'm in an alternate reality. Because, like, App, for example, the living iPod, like Jack's personal bodyguard, like, I love him to bits. It's so bizarre, because he's just this big, kind, loyal, muscular hunk of, like, he's just like a one-man army of destruction. But he cares, and he's kind, and he's considerate, and I love that character to bits, and he was never part of the original plan. And now, the irony being is that now, with book 4, I'm now telling the stories I originally planned. So what is Man-Made God? What is the new book I'm kind of on Kickstarter today is, in a weird way, that first ever Afterlife Inc. book I planned. But the difference now is that it's not starting with Jack dying. We're just going straight into it, but the threat and the challenge of this book was what would have happened in the original story.
Okay.
But the weirdest thing now is that I know what's going to happen. I know where all these characters are going. But now there's different characters in the equation, and it's kind of like we're going around the cycle again. It's kind of like this time we fix the loop. Like this time the timeline is complete, and it's so bizarre. And it's heartbreaking in a way, because I've come to love these characters. Like they're a part of me, and I know where it's all ending. I know where it's all going, and this is kind of like the beginning now. I know by telling these big stories, I'm going to have to tell the ending at some point.
So is this set before the previous?
No, this is it's a direct continuation. The only difference is, like, originally it would have been Jack has died, and now, oh heck, there's something to deal with, and this is all crazy. But now it's just like, we are continuing directly from the end of Lifeblood, and now there's something crazy to deal with. Like, and I want to keep that continuity going, because, like, at the start of the new book, like, Afterlife Inc. have temporarily relocated their headquarters, because at the end of book 3, it gets trashed by vampires. stupid sexy vampires, like you do. And I really want to keep that continuity going. So yeah, they're dealing with the aftermath of that.
Okay. And does it work as a jumping on point for anyone who has?
I really want it to be that way, because the new book is called Man-Made God, so it's a 6-part, I guess, graphic novel, if you will, made up of 6 chapters, and these are some of the chapter covers which have been kind of like playing in the background. But Man-Made God itself is actually a 5-part story, and the opening story is called Second Life, and that's our kind of jumping on point. That's like a standalone story which is saying, here's everything that's been before, here's everything that's coming, seen through the eyes of a different character, and this is how the world works. While at the same time, there is stuff going on in the background which is going to carry on throughout the whole book. So, yeah, I'd like to think it's a good jumping on point.
Okay. And how have the previous books been received?
Kind of better than I could have ever hoped, really. Like, it was always a crazy experiment, and I feel if I'd sold one book, I would have been happy. But somehow it's always sold well, and somehow that's given me kind of like the strength to keep making them, and to kind of like and keep funding them, because of course all the money we make goes back into making the comics. Like none of us in Big Punch are drawing a salary off what we do. It'd be lovely, but like it's all funding in, and the beauty of it is that like the comic bills are paying the comic expenses, so the business is self-fulfilling. But comics is a really hard business to kind of like make a living in, and I think if I really wanted to be rich, I would have, I don't know, become an investment banker or something like that. But or maybe I should have written a book that would have been better received. But no, like the comics have been lovely, and I almost feel like I'm living a kind of, I don't know, like I've cheated my way into this life, because all I ever, as I said before, all I ever wanted was someone to do it for me, and because I couldn't find anyone, I had to do this stuff myself, and then everyone thinks I know what I'm doing, and I don't. I'm just kind of like making it up as I go along. But it's amazing. I mean, like, we couldn't have made the second book again if the third one hadn't done well, and we kickstarted book 3, which was an amazing experience, and especially since it was such a terribly run Kickstarter, and I made so many mistakes, and I structured my rewards badly, but somehow people still supported us. And then of course we did the crossover, with Nick's world, with 7 String, and everything that's come out of that, I could barely have believed possible. That was never part of the original plan. If me and Nick hadn't had this disgusting bromance where we were just so in love with each other's work that we had to join forces and form a business, but it's mad, my characters have entered his world, his characters have crossed over into mine, suddenly it all feels bigger and more real. And the very fact that we can come to a show like this and people can care enough to come along and hear me waffle on for an hour is like the best honour I could imagine. I feel like I've found my kind of self-worth through making comics. That's perhaps why I feel so passionately about them. It was never just like, oh, I'm going to make a comic. This was always my, I don't want to say big, but it was kind of like my calling. Like I'm like on a mission here, and I don't think I could have done anything. Don't think I could have chosen a different path if I wanted to. But hey, comics are fun, right?
You mentioned the crossover with Nick's series, 7 String.
Yes.
Did that bring a new audience to your work?
It certainly did, yeah. I'm just going to take a sip of coffee, pardon me. No, it certainly did, and I think vice versa as well. Sorry, speaking of app, some lovely muscles have just flashed up on the screen behind us. Yeah, it was amazing, and I think because it's like Nick's 7 String audience suddenly, became aware of Afterlife Inc. and vice versa. And I think also because we did that crossover, and because we stupidly left it in canon, we suddenly created a shared universe. And then we created a business off the back of it, and all of Nick's future plans for his comic, and all my future plans have kind of merged in a way. So I feel like both audiences have kind of crossed over, and we've also, I guess, generated a third audience somewhere in the middle, this unholy union of big punchers, I guess. So, but yeah, it's been fantastic.
Okay, if anyone's sitting here thinking this series sounds absolutely amazing, which I'm sure they are, and they want to support it, how do they go about it?
Well, it all went live on Kickstarter today, which is crazy because we had to click launch and then hop in the car and drive here. So perhaps good for my blood pressure and sanity, I've not actually been checking the page today. So we could have made nothing. We could have done all right. But yeah, if you would like to support the book, it's on Kickstarter right now. There's a rather convoluted link down in the corner, but if you want to find it directly, you can go to afterlife-inc.com, and the entire comic is now online for free, so you can read the backstory, you can check up on it all. The new book is 172 pages. It's a 6-part story. It's an arc, but it's also like it's leading the way for future books because, like I said, we're in that cycle now where it's the beginning of the end, and it might take me another decade, but we'll know there's an end in sight. And and it's half made already. That's the thing. Like Kickstarter isn't like a magic wand. You can't wave it and just suddenly make money appear. Like I looked at the numbers originally, and because I want to pay my artists, because I want to pay everyone involved, it was a really expensive prospect. And I think originally I looked at it and it just wasn't affordable. Like if I wanted to hit my original target, we would have had to have given away more copies of the book than I was printing. Like it just would have, the money wasn't, it's not a fix-all, it won't solve all problems. So hence why it's taken me perhaps so long to get the new book out, is because I've spent the last couple of years funding it myself. I've been putting money aside. So I've funded half the book, which is made. It's all done. And the Kickstarter is just to cover the remainder. So the idea is that if you back it, the moment the project ends, we will send you the chapters. So we'll send you the chapters as PDFs while we're working on the rest of the book. So we want to keep people in the loop while we're working on it. And then the moment the book is finished, once the latter half is done, we will send you the whole, you'll get a physical book at the end of it. So yeah, it's £17 if any of you are interested, and it is 172 full colour pages. And there's sweat, blood, and hopefully some fun in there as well.
And how long is the Kickstarter?
30 days.
Okay.
So today's day one, and end of September it comes to a conclusion.
Cool.
So yeah, we're kind of out in the shark tank of Kickstarter now, and at the mercy of the world. We'll see what happens really.
And what are the plans for after Volume 4?
Well, I mean, after Volume 4, hey, come in.
Okay.
After Volume 4, like I said, it's hopefully keep powering on into Volume 5 and onwards. I mean, I think we're looking at, in total, we're going to be about 7 or 9 books. If I can bring it in at 9, I will. But like I said, the end has always been exciting, and it could take me the better part of, as I said, a decade. We could all be here with our Zimmer frames looking back at the end of the series. But yeah, I'm hoping that this is, quite literally the jumpstart, the kickstart the series needs to kind of move forward, because making these books is expensive, and because I want to make it to a certain level of quality, and I really want to pay everyone involved. I want to do a fair deal for everyone, and so there's been this kind of stalling process while I've been getting funds together to get the new book done. And I'm hoping that once this book is out there, it will kind of break the seal in a way, and now kind of like the others will follow. And if we're lucky enough to be funded, it'll be amazing. But if we're even luckier and we go over, then that money is just going to go straight back into making the next book. Because yeah, the next book's planned. Like I said, it's all planned out. I always have this roadmap in my head, and sometimes we take little diversions. But yeah, hopefully this is the golden age. The golden age now of Afterlife Inc. It'll just keep powering ahead. And then, of course, the movie, the sequel,
Obviously.
I
will be expecting a part
the
of
trilogy, the Civil War, and then and then the next step is profit.
And beyond Afterlife Inc., what else have Big Punch Studios got lined up for us?
Well, we are we're working on BPM, which is our quarterly magazine. which collects 4 ongoing series from the greater Big Punch multiverse. So in pure kind of Marvel DC style, everything you read is part of a bigger story, and we want each story to function on its own, but for them to be all contributing to a greater whole that even Afterlife Inc. and Semstring are part of. So yeah, we want it to be kind of like a multiverse in your pocket. So we're coming to the end of like our second year of Big Punch magazine, which has been going really well, because of course we took a bit of an experiment there and we started offering it as a subscription service, which we knew not many kind of UK comics were doing, and certainly on an indie level. So that's been an interesting thing as well, and that's been a way of reaching new fans and outside of conventions, you know, kind of keeping stuff going out. But we've got, we're coming up to the second end of the end of year 2. Sorry, is what I meant to say. And somehow we've got 8 magazines out in 2 years. It's over like 360 pages of comic material, which, you know, I forget sometimes. we never stop to smell the roses. That's our problem. We're always moving on to the next project. But we got our first card game out last year as well, which was Sandwich Masters. And I guess as Big Punch, we're hoping to keep going with Big Punch magazine, taking that to new heights. I would say this, but we do have some really exciting stuff lined up in the next couple of years, and I think because it's worked out into like 2-year cycles where you get like a loose kind of story arc coming to an end, and I think the second, like years 3 and 4 are going to be pretty special. And yeah, it's like in the spirit of crossovers, you may be seeing some familiar faces popping up in other titles, so that's pretty exciting. And we do have some ideas. We were working on our second board game as well, which got to prototype stage and has gone on the back burner for the time being while we're focusing on some of the other things. I don't know, I've been quite ill this past year as well, so kind of like I've always got this little voice at the back of my head cracking the whip, but I'm hoping like with that behind me now, I can get back to being productive again.
Okay, fantastic. Did anyone have any questions?
If I could ask about the artists. Which artists have you got in Volume 4? And
Yeah.
have you chosen who you get to work on artists? Because you have quite a variety of different styles, and how do you pick those? And
Yeah, it's interesting because the original formats of the Afterlife Inc., certainly the first 2 Afterlife Inc. books, were kind of very short, like 8-page chapters, which was mostly defined by how much I could afford at a time when I was making them. And so, but it was also an opportunity to work with a lot of different artists. So a lot of people liked the fact that we had different artists involved and they were, you know, bringing different things to different stories. And there was a lot of fun in kind of pairing an artist's style to the story in question. But with the new series, certainly, and something we began with Lifeblood, book 3, we started telling these longer, like American-style chapters, so kind of 22 pages, 24 pages, that kind of thing. And so we started having one art team doing longer runs. And a lot of people like that, but they also kind of miss like these backup stories. They might kind of short stories in a variety of artists. So what I'm trying to do going ahead is pair an art team to a longer run. I mean, not to kind of flatter myself by making comparisons to, say, Sandman, but much like Sandman did, where every book would have a different art team or something. But no, for this book here, we have the return of Ash, who has drawn most of our stuff from the beginning. So Ash has done a couple of chapters, but then we have this new gentleman, David Tinto, who I met at a show a couple of years ago, who is he's doing. We call him and his mates the Italian Stallions. We're a bunch of artists from Italy, and we're all kind of amazing. But David is doing. David is providing pencils for the majority of the book. We've got Mike Bunt doing inks, who's been a frequent collaborator. He's like the cheeriest, most reliable guy in comics. You just give him a buzz, and like a few minutes later, an inked page appears in your inbox. He's kind of amazing. And Verity Glass, who's here this weekend, who is our regular artist on Orb in BPM, is doing the colours for this book. So it's looking particularly vibrant, I have to say. I think that's kind of everyone. Lucy and myself are doing the letters, which is a skill we've picked up through Big Punch magazine. And then we have an amazing cover, which some of you who came in later may have missed, but I'll swing around to it in a second, by another one of the Italian Stallions called Raphael Riccardi, who has this amazing kind of Olivia Capel style which is just fantastic, actually. But then we have, we're running a couple of backup stories in the new book. So we have Will Tempest, an illustrated story he did, called The Ever There, which we will be running as a backup, which is previously we published as an exclusive digital download, but that's going to be collected in the book. And also we're going to have a special backup adventure featuring Rich Fire, who last turned up in Lifeblood and is mostly absent from this story, but we want to explain where he's been. And I don't want to name the artist on that yet, but we've got hopefully a complete, more comedic story lined up at the end. But yeah, I'm nothing without my artists, basically. They make me look good. Can't draw to save my life. But yeah, any other questions? Don't worry if not. No, you've no skin off my nose. I can. Perhaps I can. Say perhaps a little bit about what the new book's about.
Yeah.
Well, in a nutshell, we have that kind of jumping on story we talked about, where we see the events that have gone so far, the events taking us forward through the eyes of a new character, and then we have the main story, Man-Made God, and of course Jack is the CEO of a newly, human-driven afterlife. But the question is, who did he take over from? What happened to the people who disappeared? What happened to the former rulers of the afterlife? So now it's like Jack is at the peak of his power, and some of these former rulers are returning, and Jack is now faced with the dilemma of, can he be trusted to relinquish the power to the afterlife's true owners, and really should he? So it's kind of like really the book is about kind of Jack finally taking responsibility for his actions, and also maybe some of the sheen of Jack's corporate message kind of starting to rub off a bit. And so far everything's been pretty wonderful for Apple, I think. Yeah, I mean, monsters have attacked, and there was a giant walking vampire factory god at one point, and things have been chaotic, but Apple, I think, has always come out on top, and I think this is the beginning of a real opposition to what they stand for, which is something which is going to carry on through future books. And also there have been some very subtle plot threads, which are maybe too subtle because no one's come up and asked me about them yet, but some very subtle plot threads in the previous books are going to start paying off. So yeah, when we get to like the big reveal, I want people to go, it was always planned. Whatever it was. I leave it open so I can just pretend to look smart.
Your Hodor moment.
Indeed, yes, exactly, yeah, we want to have a Hodor moment. That's what it is. Well, anything else? Well, no, I don't mind putting a pin in it there if everyone is
okay. No further questions.
If everyone's happy, because I love the sound of my voice, so I could keep. Oh, you're very kind. But no, I'm happy to. Call it there.
Well, if you do have any more questions, you can catch John at his table, which is kind of directly opposite the main entrance, isn't it?
Yeah, we're on the far wall
side
as you come round, and
I'm sure John will be happy to talk to you there and sell you things.
I'll quite happily talk your ear off. Yeah, so thank you all for coming. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Oh, before I go, if you want to applause, This podcast, and others like it, is made possible thanks to our wonderful backers on Patreon. To support Big Punch Studios as we make comics like Afterlife Thinking 7-String, games like Sandwich Masters, and podcasts like the one you've just been listening to, head on over to www.patreon.com/Big Punch Studios. For just $5 a month, not only will you help make everything we do a reality, but we'll also send you 4 copies of Big Punch magazine a year. That's over 180 full-colour pages of comic action, featuring Cuckoos, Orb, 99 Swords and Catamaran, delivered straight to your door. This has been a Big Punch Studios production. For all things Big Punch, be sure to head on over to www.bigpunchstudios.com.